The courtroom lights seemed colder that day. The air felt heavy as Cassie stepped onto the witness stand, her voice steady as she revealed details that had remained in the shadows until now. Diddy, seated across from her, clasped his hands tightly, his face tense until something she said shattered him. In front of everyone, he lost control. What did Cassie say that made one of the most powerful names in the industry crumble before his own secrets? The scenes that followed revealed more than just a breakdown. They exposed everything he had tried to keep hidden from the world. Sean "Diddy" Combs was the embodiment of success, a business mogul, hip-hop royalty, and a media visionary. But all of that began to collapse the moment Kes Ventura walked through the courtroom doors with her eyes fixed ahead and a calmness that contrasted with the tension in the air. She entered wearing a form-fitting earth-toned dress, her pregnancy clearly visible, and didn't cast a single glance at the man waiting on the defendant's bench. Silence settled like a thick fog as soon as she began to speak. Her words came out calmly, but with a weight that sliced through the air like blades. The details Cassie unveiled didn't just shock, they tore apart the meticulously crafted image of Combs. With each new revelation, seasoned journalists exchanged glances in disbelief, as if even they, accustomed to the dark side of celebrity, weren't prepared for what they were hearing. She revealed that nothing, absolutely nothing, about her private life with Combs had been spontaneous. From what she wore to how the lighting was arranged in the bedroom, everything was precisely choreographed by him. And then came the term that chilled everyone in the room: freaks. For Cassie, that word took on meaning about a year into the relationship. It was a disturbing ritual created by Combs, in which he instructed her to be with other men while he watched. According to her, it was masked as voyeurism, but at its core, it was control. A veiled form of domination disguised as desire. At the time, she was only 21, young, inexperienced, enchanted by a powerful man who promised to change her life. She said yes to everything, not out of desire, but because she wanted to please him. She wanted to be accepted, to be loved. One of the most anticipated moments of the trial was her testimony about a video from 2016 in which Combs is seen assaulting Cassie in a hotel. The footage, widely circulated years later, took on new weight as jurors heard her version. Combs' defense tried to discredit the video, claiming it was merely a jealous outburst, not evidence of exploitation or systemic abuse. But the way Cassie recounted that incident, and others like it, painted a much darker and more complex portrait than anyone had imagined. For decades, Diddy ruled the music industry like a king. Founder of Bad Boy Records, he helped launch stars like the notorious B.I.G. and McKay, expanding his empire into fashion, beverages, and television. His name became synonymous with triumph, a symbol of turning lyrics into financial empires. However, now under the weight of these testimonies, that grandeur started to look like a grim facade. While the media praised him as a flawless businessman, tailored suits, rehearsed smiles, motivational speeches, Cassie claimed she was living a nightmare behind the scenes. The contrast between the Diddy in the spotlight and the man she described was so stark, it left the courtroom in collective disbelief. On the morning of the trial's second day, Combs arrived with his usual swagger. Sharp suit, surrounded by lawyers who looked like they'd stepped out of a legal manual. He smiled, greeted people as though attending a board meeting, not facing devastating allegations from his former partner. But that confidence quickly dissolved within minutes of Cassie's testimony. Diddy's empire of control began to fracture. He fidgeted in his seat, his expression slowly contorting. His attorneys stood up repeatedly, trying to object, trying to stop her. But it was too late. Cassie's words had too much weight. What was once his stage was now a courtroom where he no longer held the script. Witnesses said he seemed like a different person. He kept tugging at his shirt collar, then at his tie, as if trying to regain control. At one point, he started scribbling frantic notes to his attorneys so quickly that one of them had to raise a hand, asking him to calm down. A journalist described the moment as the instant someone realizes, in horror, that they've lost control of their own narrative. Another observer noted that Combs looked physically unwell, as if his body was reacting to the weight of the revelations. He closed his eyes during crucial moments, unable to face what was being said, and all of this, every tremor, every heavy silence, was only the beginning. As the day progressed, the atmosphere in the courtroom thickened. Cassie described not just the forced encounters, but the psychological mechanisms that kept her bound to him. When asked whether she ever enjoyed the so-called freaks, she paused, emotional, and admitted she did, but explained that what brought her joy was the rare attention Combs gave her during those moments. It was the only time she felt he cared. Experts say this clearly shows signs of deep emotional manipulation, a cycle blending affection with total control. The truth was, she had been young, idealistic, and vulnerable. She had signed a 10-album contract with Combs' label, creating an almost total dependency. He didn't just manage her career, he shaped her identity, her desires, her freedom. She believed that loving him meant obeying him, yielding to him, enduring everything, and that, as the courtroom made clear, became fertile ground for years of silent suffering. The mask of the empire was beginning to fall. For the first time, the man used to scripting his own legend was facing a narrative he couldn't erase or silence, and it had just begun. Cass Ventura took the witness stand with a steady voice, but her eyes held the weight of years of silence. She wasn't just telling her story. She was unearthing scars that until then only she had known. And what came out of her mouth left the courtroom in complete silence. She didn't try to seem strong all the time. She admitted she had been young, naive, and truly believed she had found someone who not only loved her, but would also boost her music career. She thought she had entered a relationship with a powerful man who saw potential in her. But everything changed after the first freak. Cassie revealed that after that episode she felt dirty. She didn't want to go through it again. But when she tried to bring up the subject by email, she was quickly put in her place. Diddy responded bluntly, "I know you don't want to do this." She backed off, tried to soften it. "That's not exactly what I meant." But it was clear she had no control. That email exchange happened in 2010. She already wanted to stop, but according to her, she felt like she couldn't. The prosecution wasted no time. They went straight to the point. Physical abuse, humiliation, psychological coercion, and emotional manipulation. Cass described in detail how she was beaten. She said her head was slammed into the floor, that she was kicked, dragged, and stomped on by Diddy. And those so-called freaks were far more than the word suggested. They involved hired escorts, sex orchestrated by Diddy, and everything was planned by Cassie herself, because, according to her, that became part of her role in the relationship. She said she didn't feel she had a choice. If she refused, she could be punished, blackmailed, or see her career destroyed. Several times she had to stop, take deep breaths, and hold back tears. Meanwhile, on the other side of the room, Diddy sat quietly, hands on his lap, trying to appear unfazed, but no one believed that calm. With every sentence, the tension increased. Cassie began to recount how it all started. She was 19 when she met Diddy, a giant name in the music world, owner of a major label, wealthy, influential. She was a young model full of dreams. He had power, she had hope, and according to her, he knew exactly how to use that to his advantage. She described the methods of control, subtle at first, then suffocating. According to Cassie, Diddy wanted to know where she was at all times. If she went out with friends, he would show up without warning. If she tried to work with other artists, he sabotaged the collaborations. She even claimed he installed a tracker on her phone. She said he would call the moment she arrived somewhere, already knowing her location. Little by little, he severed her ties with friends and family. Complete isolation. The judge had to pause the hearing 3 times due to Diddy's reactions. He shook his head, whispered to his lawyers, made visible expressions to the jury. Every time he was warned, he tried to pull himself together. But the control he once had outside that room didn't work in this courtroom. Then came the turning point. Cassie handed her phone to her lawyer. Images were projected before the entire courtroom. Emails, texts, evidence. Diddy's expression changed instantly. He looked stunned, as if he didn't know she had saved that material. The messages included apologies for violent outbursts, veiled threats against her career, and direct contradictions to the public image he had maintained for years. And that was just the beginning. Cassie began detailing incidents of physical violence. She said she was thrown against walls, and that once she was pushed down a staircase in a house in Miami. But perhaps the most disturbing part, she claimed that on several occasions, Diddy tried to suffocate her until she passed out, stopping only when her body began to collapse. Jurors were visibly shaken. One woman in the jury cried quietly. A man could barely look at the defendant. Even the most seasoned journalists admitted they weren't prepared for the amount of detail Cassie was revealing. And the most shocking part, it was all just a build-up to what would come next. The hotel incident, the one caught on video, the one that could become the trial's defining moment. Cassie said all of this while carrying another life inside her. She's pregnant, and still she held herself steady, even in vulnerability. One crucial point. Since the beginning, the defense tried to paint the picture that she chose to be there, that everything was consensual. But the real question now, hanging in the air, is, did she truly have a choice? The moment Cassie finally broke down came unexpectedly. Until then, her voice had been low, her tone calm as she answered each question. But when asked why she took part in the so-called freaks, the emotional wall crumbled. She took a deep breath and said, "I liked being with Sean Combs. I did it because it made him happy." That's when the emotion took over for the first time. It wasn't just pain, it was contradiction, it was inner confusion. The kind of answer that disarms even the most experienced prosecutor. The jurors were fully focused, each one's eyes fixed on Cassie, absorbing every word, every expression, every pause, and it makes sense. Cassie isn't just a witness. She's the key piece of this entire puzzle. She was Diddy's partner for over a decade. No one knows more than she does how this alleged empire of abuse may have been built behind the spotlight. And to the prosecution, she's vital. The accusation claims that Sean Combs didn't act alone. He allegedly created an organized structure to fulfill his desires, using manipulation, intimidation, and power. And Cassie began outlining that structure in vivid detail. One of the most shocking parts was when she named, with roles, 7 people close to Diddy, including his former chief of staff, drivers, bodyguards, and even someone managing his finances. Cassie explained that she interacted with all of them, that these people knew what was going on, that they were part of the machinery, but nothing prepared the courtroom for the next revelation. "I thought I was going to die that night." The sentence came out low, but full of desperation. It was the beginning of a story never before told, not by her, not by the press, not by the tabloids. It happened in a luxury hotel, the Four Seasons, and it changed everything. According to Cassie, it began as a typical music industry party, just another event. But Diddy allegedly snapped after seeing her talking to another executive. His smile vanished. His face changed. He grabbed her arm so tightly it left visible marks, then kept smiling for the other guests. But he whispered threats through clenched teeth near her ear. Cassie said he dragged her through the hotel lobby straight to the elevator while she cried and tried to resist. A security guard saw it, approached, but upon recognizing Diddy, simply asked, "Is everything all right?" He replied yes, and the guard walked away. "He didn't ask if I was okay," she added. Then came the evidence. Cassie's attorney displayed photos she had taken herself the following day. Blurry images captured in a bathroom mirror with a cell phone, a split lip, bruises on her arms, redness on her neck. Real photos, raw, and because of that, devastating. Cassie explained she took those photos because she knew one day she would need to prove what she had endured. The defense panicked, tried to block the images, argued they weren't valid, hadn't been submitted earlier, and shouldn't be shown. The judge dismissed every objection. The photos appeared on the big screens. The reaction was instant. A female juror raised her hand to her mouth, visibly shocked. 2 male jurors looked away. A third, seated at the back, took notes so frantically her hand trembled. No words were spoken at that moment, but the silence was deafening. This hotel incident hadn't appeared in any prior complaints. Even Diddy's team didn't know it was coming. The panic on his attorney's faces made that obvious, and when Cassie described what happened in that room, things grew even more serious. She recounted how he threw a champagne bottle at her, missed by inches. The bottle shattered against the wall. She said Diddy destroyed the entire room in a fit of rage, smashed lamps, flipped furniture, punched a door. He kept her locked in that room for 2 days, took her phone, threatened what would happen if she tried to escape. When she finished speaking, every eye in the courtroom turned to Diddy. What would he do now? His expression at that moment may have been the most powerful image of the entire trial, and possibly the beginning of the end of his career. The defense, for its part, tried to shift the narrative. They want to convince the jury that Cassie wasn't forced, that everything was consensual, that in fact she wanted to be with Diddy, that he helped launch her into the music world, that her career was possible because of him. But what the prosecution wants to make crystal clear is this: maybe it began with excitement, but it ended in fear, pain, and complete control. Cassie is now attempting to reconstruct that timeline for the jurors. She's showing them how the initial glow quickly turned to darkness. She named people from the entertainment industry, like producer Dallas Austin, introduced as a friend and potential witness. And there are signs that other celebrities, like Kanye West and Karrueche Tran, were mentioned during jury selection. It's still unclear what exact roles those figures played, but the mere fact that they're on the radar shows the scale of this story. Cassie is still on the witness stand, but one thing is certain: the world is now hearing what she kept in silence for over a decade. The defense hasn't even had a chance to question Cassie yet. And it doesn't look like they will anytime soon. As a key witness, all signs indicate she will remain on the stand the rest of the day, revealing more details that could shift the trial. One curious detail that came to light: Cassie used to call Sean Combs Pop P, or just Pop, and he affectionately called her CC. When the prosecution asked what CC meant, she answered, Cassie Combs. But what kind of witness is Cassie appearing to be in the eyes of the jury? Her image, pregnant, nearly at the end of her term, naturally evokes empathy. That's undeniable. But jurors were instructed to stay impartial, to focus only on the facts. Cassie presented herself as someone who, at the time, was lost, trying to understand who she was, trying to find herself within that complicated relationship. Today, at nearly 40 years old, she is a different person. But what her testimony makes clear is that back then, she had no control. Not over what she wore, not over who she could be, not over who she was involved with. She was, by her own admission, practically a puppet. That is the central point. Cassie is saying that during that phase of her life, she had no autonomy. It was all under Sean's control, and when she talks about it, that emotion becomes evident. At one point during her testimony, she broke down and cried in front of the court, a moment that no one present will forget. And what about Diddy's reaction? The man who built his empire on an image of absolute control and icy composure was crumbling right there, live in front of everyone. The carefully constructed mask he wore for decades began to fall until it shattered into pieces. Reporters, who have covered celebrity trials for years, said they had never seen anything like it. Diddy entered the room confident, a true titan of the industry. Hours later, he looked like a cornered man on the edge of desperation. With every accusation from Cassie, he seemed to shrink in his seat. His legal team worked frantically to try to keep him calm. Witnesses said one of his attorneys was physically holding Diddy's arm to steady him. At one point, they even handed him a note written in bold letters. "Stay calm." But it didn't work. Things reached a boiling point when Diddy slammed his hand on the table so hard the sound echoed throughout the courtroom. The judge immediately halted proceedings to warn him, "Mr. Combs, if you can't control yourself, you will be removed from this courtroom." For a moment, it seemed like Diddy might actually be kicked out of his own trial. Meanwhile, Cassie continued. His panic was obvious. He constantly shook his head as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. More than once, observers saw him moving his lips, silently repeating, "This isn't true," as if he forgot that a jury was watching his every gesture. One courtroom observer commented that he looked like a man who had never been confronted this way before, finally realizing that he could no longer control the narrative. For years, Diddy allegedly controlled every aspect of Cassie's life. Now, she was at the microphone, free to tell her side, and he couldn't do a thing. He couldn't cut off her testimony. He couldn't call security to remove her. He couldn't send his PR team to deny it in the press. All he could do was sit and listen. But the moment that truly shook everything was when Cassie began talking about the threats. She revealed that Diddy had allegedly threatened her family if she ever spoke publicly about what had happened. And then came the bombshell. She had recordings, real audio clips with his voice making those threats. Her lawyer played the recordings in court. That's when Diddy exploded. He stood up suddenly and shouted at Cassie, "You know that's not how it happened." It took 3 attorneys to restrain him and prevent him from interrupting the audio playback. The judge had to suspend the session, but the damage was already done. Everyone had seen it. The jury, journalists, courtroom staff. The man who had built a reputation as untouchable had just shown how truly fragile he was. As he was escorted out for a break, he looked like a completely different person than the one who had walked in that morning. The mask had fallen, and what was underneath wasn't pretty. And just when everyone thought they had seen everything, Cassie surprised the courtroom with another revelation. She had evidence no one expected. Text messages, emails, photos, all stored in places Diddy couldn't erase. The room fell silent when Cassie mentioned that she had messages from other celebrities. Not just anyone, but close friends and business associates of Diddy, people from his inner circle who had witnessed behaviors the public could never have imagined. This was only the beginning of what might be the end of Sean Combs's untouchable era. Diddy's expression said it all. Someone in the gallery whispered that he looked physically ill when Cassie began naming famous witnesses. The shock was immediate. His legal team stood up in unison, raising loud objections and requesting a sidebar with the judge. They tried everything, claimed the messages weren't admissible, that they were rumors, that they hadn't been submitted properly, but the judge wasn't having it. After reviewing the messages privately, he returned to the courtroom and overruled every objection, declaring the messages highly relevant and allowing them to be entered into evidence. That decision alone made Diddy drop his head into his hands. He knew exactly what was coming. One by one, the messages appeared on the courtroom screens. A major rapper texted Cassie after a Grammy party, "Are you okay? What I saw tonight wasn't right. If you need a place, my home is open." A pop star wrote, "I've known him for 15 years, and I've never seen him act like that with anyone. That's not normal, call me." But the most damning came from a veteran producer who had worked with Diddy for decades. He sent a message to Cassie after witnessing an incident in the studio. "I can't take this anymore. I asked him to get help. Call me when you're safe." These messages dismantled Diddy's long-held public claim that no one had ever seen anything wrong, that it was all private matters distorted by Cassie. Now the court could clearly see. People had witnessed it. They were concerned. They had tried to help. And then Diddy's own messages began to surface, screenshots showing him acknowledging the incidents. "Sorry for what happened last night. You know how I get when I drink. It won't happen again." Another read, "Whatever you need to fix this, just ask. New car, new apartment, anything." And a third string of texts showed clear attempts to silence Cassie with money. "My lawyer will draft the papers tomorrow. 2 million. Clean deal. Don't say anything about the last 5 years." As these messages were read aloud, something unusual happened in the courtroom. Several members of Diddy's entourage, the people who had arrived with him and sat just behind him in support, began quietly leaving, one by one, unable to remain as the evidence piled up. By the time this part of the testimony ended, Diddy was nearly alone at the table. Just him and his legal team, the support group he walked in with that morning, gone. The evidence no one saw coming had completely turned the tide. When the second day ended, the man who had entered the courtroom as the untouchable king of music left looking defeated. No security team could protect him from what had just unfolded inside those walls. The empire he had spent decades building seemed to be collapsing in real time. Kes Ventura didn't just tell her story that day. She may have rewritten Diddy's entire legacy. The evidence, the testimonies, the recordings, they painted a picture no one will be able to forget. The question is no longer whether Diddy can win the case. It's whether his reputation will ever recover from what the world heard inside that courtroom. And if you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this. See you again soon.